Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Mr. Rutherford. It's a pleasure for me to be in Arkansas. I was deeply touched by the warm hospitality extended to me by the governor, Mike Baby, and distinguished guests over dinner last night, in which Senator Pryor and Representative Rick Snyder and other distinguished guests were present. So I'm privileged to be here, and I'm particularly privileged to be here at the Clinton School of Public Service. It's a fine institution, and bringing the world to Little Rock and helping students gain international experience, which would serve not only Arkansas, but the entire United States and the international community. And I'm glad that Josh is going to Gujarat very soon, and I'm sure that he'll benefit from his experience, and the people in the village where he's going to work, they're going to benefit from his work. If you permit me, what I'll do is I'll share some thoughts with you on India-US relations and touching on some recent developments and trends and outlook for the future. Arkansas has been an important part in the evolution of India-US relations. And I was just at the Clinton Center, and I would like to mention that his visit to India, President Bill Clinton's visit to India, historic visit to India in March 2000, marked a new beginning in relations between India and the United States. And at that time, President Clinton and Prime Minister Vajpayee of India outlined a vision of a new relationship in which they recognize, and I quote, "In many ways, the character of the 21st century would depend on the success of our cooperation for peace, prosperity, democracy, and freedom. That presents us with an opportunity, but also a profound responsibility to work together. Our partnership of shared ideals leads to seek a natural partnership of shared endeavors," unquote. That vision was indeed bold and ambitious at a time when problems rather than prospects defined our relationship. It sought to and succeeded in charting a new course for a relationship that had been adrift for quite some time. Following the initial impetus by President Clinton and Prime Minister Vajpayee at that time, India-US relations were taken to unprecedented heights under the leadership of President George Bush and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. And it's been a great pleasure for me personally over the last 4.5 years as ambassador to your great country to see this relationship entering new frontiers and being transformed into what can be truly called a strategic partnership. Nothing has symbolized the transformation of this relationship more than the India-US Civil Nuclear Agreement, which was signed in October last year. The agreement enabled India to resume international nuclear commerce after over 3 decades. It will enhance our economic engagement and contribute to advancing our shared interests in energy security, climate change, and non-proliferation. India-US relations have, ladies and gentlemen, reached a stage where we can be now reasonably confident of its predictability, stability, and durability. There are a number of reasons why I'm confident that our relationship will endure, and that it will have great value not only for India and the United States, but for the entire world. For one, we are not only the 2 largest democracies in the world, but we are also the 2 most diverse countries in the world. We, of course, have some things in common. We have some common colonial legacy. And this has been manifested in unexpected manners. For instance, I don't know how many, all of you know the inspiring words of the Star Spangled Banner, but I don't know whether you know the India connection in those words. Those words were written actually on a ship which was HMS Minden, which was manufactured in 1810 by a company owned by a person called Jamshedji Wadia. His family, I know his successor, I mean the one who's running the company now is a friend of mine. But this was built, the ship was built in 1810 in Madras, and it was on that ship that Francis Scott Key wrote those famous words, watching the flag at fluttering at Fort McHenry. But of course, there are other connections also. There's some people think of some associations, but they're not correct. I can tell you, for instance, that at the Boston Tea Party, it was not Indian tea which was thrown overboard. So that's not the connection. But there was another tea party, you remember, when Mahatma Gandhi was invited to tea, the King Emperor at that time. And people remarked on the British were not amused by his sartorial taste. He went in a loincloth and he didn't make it any better when he was asked whether he was appropriately attired. He said, well, the King Emperor was wearing enough clothes for both of us. So they were not quite amused by that. But we have many things in common, and I mean, between India and the United States, part of our common colonial heritage. And one of them was the English language, because it's uncomfortable for the British, but the fact is that the two largest English-speaking countries today happen to be India and the United States. But I'm sure the British won't agree that we speak English. But nonetheless, however, from different circumstances, geography, history, culture, both our countries, India and the United States, have come to the common conclusions, some common conclusions, namely that democracy, pluralism, and individual rights are not only common human aspirations, but they are of abiding and universal validity. As President Obama recently said on the occasion of our Republic Day on the 26th of last month, that it's our shared values that form the bedrock of a robust relationship across people and governments. The second factor, apart from our shared values and aspirations, is that the changes in our relationship were not only because of global changes and challenges, but it coincided with India's own transformation in a changing world. And I've just remarked on it, it's not just democracy, but our sheer diversity and the very existence of India. I was talking in the morning to a different audience. The very existence of India in its tremendous diversity. Josh has just referred to the fact that we have some religious differences with Pakistan or some other differences. The fact is, it's not that at all. We have, it's often, you often hear references to, Hindu majority India, Muslim majority Pakistan. The fact is that we are the second largest Muslim population in the world after Indonesia. The fact is that there is no majority in India. Hindus constitute about 80% of our population. But if you take into account caste, language, different racial groups, the cultures, the sheer diversity, the fact is that there is no mainstream in India. There is no majority in India. Everyone, in a sense, is a minority. That is why when you talk about, like for instance, for us, recently, we had after elections in India, you had elected to office the most powerful, the party which won the elections was headed by a Christian lady who made way for a Sikh gentleman. Again, Sikhs, being a so-called minority, taking over the top executive post in India and being sworn into office by a Muslim president. Now, that would be considered to be remarkable. Of all the 3 top posts being occupied by what is so-called minorities, would have been considered to be unusual. But in India, we're not even aware of it. It's just like the air we breathe. We just take it in our stride. But it's only when we come abroad that we recognize that it's some issue on which people talk about. But the fact is that in India, I just want to mention that in passing, that there is no single majority, or certainly there is no, like for instance, in any ceremony, we don't, like for instance, when you talk about Hinduism in India, you don't have any invocation, any Hindu invocation, none. If you have any invocation, it's in all our different religions. Christianity has been in India 1,000 years before it came to Europe. The first church was set up in the year 52 by one of the apostles of Christ. We had Judaism in India before that. So Christianity and Judaism are as Indian as Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, Sikhism. So I'm just mentioning that this is an important aspect because particularly right now, even as we speak, right in the heart of Europe, you had a conflict based on religion in the Balkans, which just took us back into the Middle Ages. So the success of India means really that the inevitability of a clash of civilization forecast by Huntington is not necessarily something which is a natural outcome. And I just want to mention this factor. There is another aspect why I say that this relationship is important and this India-US relationship will be a positive factor is because our growth is not disruptive. And economic progress in the country which has the world's second largest population, soon to be the largest, is of great consequence to the world because it's going to be an anchor of global economic stability because our growth is not propelled by exports. Our growth is propelled by domestic demand. And that domestic demand arises from bringing people out of poverty, creating new consumers. So when people have more disposable income, when they're freed from the chains of poverty, they become new consumers and then they create demand for consumer goods and capital goods, and that's going to propel our economic growth. And so we will be importing more than we are exporting, and we will be a sort of anchor of stability in the region and bring up that region and Asia, and in a manner which is not at the cost of any other country or group of countries. There's a third factor, that is this relationship, I'm convinced of its durability because it's based on mutual respect and mutual benefit. And trade is growing. I mentioned just earlier before this morning that trade has, during my 4 years over here, 4.5 years, it's more than doubled. But US exports to India have tripled. And Arkansas has done better than the average because I think there's been almost a 600% increase in exports from Arkansas to India. And investments also have been in both directions. In 2007, Indian investments in the United States were about $13 billion, and last year it was $18 billion. There's been a slowdown thereafter, but there's a slowdown globally, and that's affected India as well. But I'm sure that will pick up again, and there'll be investments in both directions. And I would like to say that there are even call centers. They are very much associated with India. That you have Indian call centers which are taking away jobs. You know, you say jobs are being Bangalored. The fact is that Indian companies are setting up call centers in the United States. Just one Indian company in the last 2 years has set up 7 call centers in the United States, creating 3,000 new jobs in the United States. And there are many other companies who are following suit. So it's job creation, in trade, investments, is happening in both directions. And that's what imparts stability to this relationship. The fourth factor is that it's about the most broad-based relationship that India has with any country in the world today. I've been ambassador, and as Josh pointed out, I was ambassador in Mexico, I was ambassador in Russia for a number of years, and then in Germany. I was ambassador in the United Kingdom, and then across the Atlantic, ambassador over here. But I can tell you that this relationship is about the most broad-based relationship. It's not just a relationship between two governments. It's a very broad-based relationship, and we have about 24 dialogue mechanisms ranging from global issues to counterterrorism, from defense policy and military cooperation to maritime security to natural disaster relief. I remember shortly after my arrival over here, we had this extraordinary tsunami. We just attended a midnight mass, my wife and I, Christmas, and then just by the time we came home, we heard the news of this terrible tsunami. But immediately we got together. Though India was hit by the tsunami, we reached out, and we were first on the spot in reaching out to our neighbors who were affected also. We were in Sri Lanka, in Indonesia, in Maldives, and you had the Indian Navy and the US Navy cooperating together with the Japanese in extending our cooperation in that area. So disaster relief, from trade policy interaction. We have a trade policy group, and the United States has only 3 such groups, one with Japan and the other with China. So a trade policy interaction to high technology cooperation, a comprehensive energy dialogue, an agricultural knowledge initiative, from healthcare to education. In a way, each door we open, it leads to another room, and that has more doors and windows of opportunity. So it's a very broad-based relationship, and that's another reason why I'm confident of this growth in this relationship. Fifth, and that's a very important factor, that this cooperation is not just good for both our countries, but it's good for the world. The center of gravity of both global challenges as well as opportunities is moving from the West to the East, to Asia in particular. And India is located at the strategic crossroads of India's diversity. And it's not accidental, ladies and gentlemen, that the only ocean which is named after a country happens to be the Indian Ocean. It has other connotations. If you look at where we are located, and if you see there's nothing between India and the Antarctica except Diego Garcia. So it's a huge area, and if you just look at the map, then we'll see, when you talk about India, Pakistan, for instance, when Josh talked about, that our largest neighbor, if you look at the map, you'll find is China. Our second largest neighbor, it took a tsunami for people to realize that Indonesia is our second largest neighbor. It's less than 100 nautical miles from India. And our third largest neighbor, and a very important neighbor, is Pakistan, and we have a vital stake in the stability and prosperity of Pakistan and Afghanistan also, which is a neighbor of India. But there are reasons why, what I was saying is the factors why it's good for the world. One, of course, is democracy. And we have been actively and in the forefront of promotion of democracies in a low-key manner, not in terms so much of democracy as an ideology, but democracy as a stabilizing factor. We honestly believe that if you have more stakeholders, and the stakeholding is broad-based, it contributes to greater stability and prosperity globally. And democracy is one of the manifestations. So we have taken a number of initiatives. It was not accidental that it was India and the United States which took the initiative to set up a global democracy fund, and we are the largest contributors to the fund, and we are the founding members. Together with all democracies, we had, so basically it was President Bush and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, in the presence of the German Chancellor and the British Prime Minister, a number of other global leaders, that we set up this forum. Then we have a community of democracies and other forums. But we do believe this is an important aspect, that the spread of democracy is going to be good for the world. Second aspect is a common challenge faced by us of terrorism. And we had a joint working group on terrorism much before 9/11. And we've had good intelligence cooperation, seamless links and shared intelligence after this tragic terrorist attack in Mumbai. And we recognize that we can't compartmentalize these groups and put them into separate boxes, but they are seamlessly interlinked and with shared ideologies, and their common target are free and open societies. The other aspect is where we have a shared challenge and shared concern is proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. And in our region, unfortunately, we have an intersection of both terrorism and proliferation. And this presents not just regional, but a global threat. The other aspect is, the fourth major aspect is energy security. And that is one issue on which both our countries are deeply concerned. And we need to double our fuel supplies and increase our power generation fivefold at least over the next 2 decades. And we realize the need for reducing our dependence simultaneously on fossil fuel and their imports. And though our carbon emissions are very, very small, minuscule in terms of on a per capita basis, we wish to meet our energy needs while minimizing our carbon footprint. And we will be active proponents for a partnership for greener economic future. Food security and related issues of water scarcity, and Josh is going to work in that area, water scarcity, also pose not only humanitarian but serious security challenges. It was in partnership with the United States that India launched its green revolution. We hope to make it an evergreen revolution. And the focus should not be just on food grains, but on nutrition and food security generally. We are cooperating actively in the field of tackling global pandemics like HIV/AIDS. We are working together, not just in both our countries, but we are working together in third countries, in Africa in particular, on this HIV/AIDS. Here again, President Clinton had taken a remarkable initiative, and we hope to work together, not only in this area, but avian flu and other global pandemics. Disaster relief is another area. I refer to the tsunami. Not many people realize the fact is that 70% of the global natural disasters occur in the Indian Ocean area. And, but apart from disaster relief, there are also issues where we are cooperating. That's on maritime security, protecting the sea lanes of communication, threats of piracy, etc. So, and finally, there's just one aspect which is also a very important role, which is also in a very special aspect of our relationship. That is the role of the Indian American community in promoting our bilateral relationship. And I'd like to particularly acknowledge the role of Indian Americans in this country. The 2.7 million strong Indian American community doing extremely well. In terms of education, they are about the highest in the chart. In terms of economic well-being and contributing, then in terms of contributing to the intellectual capital in this country, they've played a tremendously important role. In one aspect, there's only one aspect in which they are absolutely scraping the bottom of the barrel, as you say, and that is in terms of incidence of crime. So I'd like to say that because of these and other factors, I'm confident that this relationship between India and the United States is going to be a durable relationship, and we can expect that it's firmly set on an upward trajectory. It's not that we're going to agree on every issue, because India is too large a country, and as I said, it's too vibrant a democracy, it's too old a civilization to ever be a follower of any country. We will not be a follower, but we'll be a partner. We will not see eye to eye on every issue, but there's much more which unites us than divides us. And I don't see in the foreseeable future any major international issue or global issue on which our objectives do not coincide. And we look forward to this partnership. I thank you for giving me a very patient listening. I've exceeded, I've kept to my time limit broadly, exceeded by a few minutes. But when, if you're talking of a country of over 1 billion people, so I've averaged about, I would say, per minute, I'm speaking for about more than 55 million people of India. Thank you.
All right. We have time for some questions right here on the second row. I'll hand you.
Yes, Terry Richard at the University of Arkansas, I'm a sociologist. The advantage of the diversity, of course, is the wonderful foods as well as the different cultural aspects of India, but there are also the negatives such as secessionist or separatist groups that emerge, and I think the main one in India is in Kashmir. And I was curious whether or not, which is a kind of a boiling point, I think, between both Pakistan and India. What is the policy? Is there a chance that there may ultimately be a separate state that would emerge, or are there really efforts to diplomatically resolve that issue with terrorism and the Kashmiri separatists?
First, I would like to say is that, thank you, Mr. Rutherford. I mean, thank you for, taking this question, answer, and for your giving me this opportunity. One is, I'm glad that you raised this issue of separatist problems or problems of insurgencies. We do have a problem. For instance, in the northeast of India, one of my, person who went to school with me, we were in school throughout together, and he was commissioned in the army, and within a year of his service in the army, he was killed. And he was killed by a citizen of India. In the northeast, we had an insurgency in a place called Mizoram. But let me tell you, that was a full-scale insurgency which went on for 20 years. Which battles, in which the Indian Army was involved, the security force, Today, and not just today, but for the last 2 decades, the same people who were the insurgents, except those against whom you could actually press murder charges or some criminal charges, the same people were voted into office and out of office. It ceased to be a problem. So unless some people, if they get their oxygen from abroad, if it's within our country, we can do it. Because the power of the ballot box is a very powerful, that's one thing which is keeping India together in terms of its diversity. You remember there was a much talk of, there was thinking that after Nehru what? Because people thought that it's Nehru who's keeping this country together. How can a country which is so diverse stay together? There is an Indianness in this diversity. And we have resolved problems of this nature. So when you talk of Kashmir and terrorism, this group, for instance, which attacked in Bombay, they regard Kashmir almost as a diversion. It's a Punjabi group based in Pakistan. Hard Sunni Wahhabi group. They have actually contempt for what they see as a lotus-eating Kashmiris with their soft version of Islam, which talks about universal brotherhood and all those airy-fairy notions. They have, right from the beginning when they were set up as a group to re-establish the Muslim rule. They set up the caliphate all over South Asia, stretching, Indonesia is already Muslim, So that was a target, and they had identified three principal opponents: India, the United States, and Israel. Therefore, in this Bombay attack, it was the first time that people were identified on the basis of their faith and their nationality. So let's not have illusions about that. And to equate them is an insult to Muslims in India. We have 165 million Muslims, of which, of course, 5 million live in Kashmir. But it is not an issue of religion. And the Kashmir Valley is just about 10% of the area of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And when you're talking of the area of, I don't want to go into details, but it's like Chicago wanting to secede and the state of Illinois not wanting to. It's not that. Even that is not clear, because we've just had elections with a remarkable turnout, because we do believe in the transformative power of democracy, and it has been there. When I was in Britain, I said, look, if you get your act together, like we did, you would have resolved Northern Ireland much faster. So we don't need, those kind of tutorials from anyone. We have only places where if it is kept alive at the cost of violence, that is not acceptable. If that is given as an excuse for attacking innocent women and children and civilians, that is not acceptable. And what we are doing, what we're talking about, is an issue of terrorism, which I said is a global issue. This organization is a global organization. It's been active in all parts of India, not in Kashmir, primarily also. It's been active against NATO forces and US forces in Afghanistan. It's turned up in Iraq. It's turned up in Sudan, in Eritrea, in Chechnya and Russia. It's global. I wouldn't like to dwell on this further, but we had excellent cooperation from the FBI. Why the FBI? Why not the CIA? Need I say anything more? These are global organizations, and the threat is global. You remember, we're talking of, and I'm sure I've just been to the Clinton Center. At that time when President Clinton had ordered some missile attacks in Afghanistan after some US embassies were bombed in Africa, where did the missiles hit? It was this group. It was supposed to be Al-Qaeda, but they're indistinguishable. It was supposed to be a freedom fighter, Kashmiri freedom fighter, who was identified as a freedom fighter till he killed another Bombay-based journalist called Daniel Pearl. Then suddenly he got transformed into a terrorist. I mean, so let's not kid ourselves. Right? I was saying that these groups, you cannot put them into neat little boxes. They're constantly mutating. And they are like, it's not just the economy which is globalizing. These are global groups with a global agenda and with a global reach.
Further question? John, right here. That's it. Let's get the mic. No, we need it. We'll get it to you. Wait a minute, John. Hold.
Yes, sir.
Okay. We appreciate your remarks. You mentioned during your remarks the development of a greater consumer-driven economy in India, and I wonder if you could elaborate, given the size of your country and the development of technology in India, what you see as the vision for how your economy develops and how that will affect the relationship between the United States and India in the future.
I would say that, in every aspect, every single aspect of the development of our economy, as it happens, we have a coincidence of interest. Like our economic development, as I said, it's not disruptive. It's not going to be, let's say, even in the India-US context, I try to give some illustrative comments. But what I was driving at is it's going to be two-way traffic, job creation, and investments, trade, and so on and so forth. But beyond that, I think if you look at energy security, which is a vital, critical aspect of our national security in both countries. For both countries, and this is not true with India's relationship with a number of other countries, is that we will both have to, in our own interests, reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, and thus simultaneously address the issue of climate change, and thus simultaneously reduce our dependence, or being, I would put it in a crude manner, being, right now we are held hostage to developments which are completely outside our control. Some development, some other part of the world, and then you have, oil prices shooting through the roof. We will both benefit from a bit more predictability in some of those factors which are beyond our control. So energy is one issue on which we already have an existing dialogue. I talked about civil nuclear cooperation. That, of course, is a positive development because it helps us to diversify our energy portfolio. And India also is, India happens to be the first country in Asia to set up a nuclear reactor. We set up a nuclear reactor, the first country in Asia, and therefore we also happen to be the first country in the world to call for a nuclear proliferation treaty. We were the first country in the world to call for a nuclear test ban. But beyond nuclear, we need to go into other areas in doing more research and development in clean coal technologies. We have very large coal reserves in the United States and in India. In India, our coal has got a very high ash content. It's a challenge, but it's a technological challenge. We hope we'll do more to have the research in solar and other alternative sources of power and make that economic, beating the issue of storage and transmission costs, essentially. We believe it's not beyond our ingenuity. We'll have to, even as a poor country, we are willing to and set aside several $1 billion in joint endeavors. But also, like water scarcity is going to be a huge, huge problem. I know that one of our biggest challenges, it's not interstate challenges, like India. We're talking of India, Pakistan. It's become a huge issue between different states in India. The upper riparian state and the lower riparian, and it can get very tense in the federal structure of government that we have. The issues of water. There again, it's linked to the issue of energy. Without energy, you cannot resolve some of those water scarcity issues. There are huge, huge numbers. We are talking of like some of our challenges today are like, we are going back to the Middle Ages. You have this piracy. There again, our two navies are cooperating, but we need to do much more to get together with other regional forces to tackle this threat. I gave you India's location, where we are located. We straddle an area through which a lot of the global commerce, travels through the Straits of Malacca and the Gulf of Hormuz. So we have very vital interests in keeping those sea lanes open. There are a whole heap of areas. In fact, I don't see any area in any major challenge in which our interests do not intersect. So it's a very, very broad area where we can and should work together. Thank you.
Dr. Anand has a question right here.
Thank you, Skip. The healthcare in India has undergone a fair amount of transformation in the last 5-10 years. How can the two countries, healthcare, sort of learn from each other and help each other to develop? We don't have universal healthcare in this country, as it isn't available in India as well. So, are there mutually cooperative programs right now?
We do have some programs, but they're not enough. We're just scratching the surface of the potential. But India, it's a huge challenge. In fact, the two areas where I think we have neglected in India, with hindsight, one is education, one is health. and the related issues of nutrition and all that. But healthcare is one area where we can do a lot because we've got the resources, that's the human resources. We have bright, intelligent people. We can, if we work together, we will be able to significantly reduce costs also. You know, one of the reasons why, I'll just tell you, for instance, you take these automobile companies, or you take many US companies which are having difficulties today. A big chunk of their costs, you know, are basically, you know, pensioners and not only pension payments, but it's healthcare. Suppose we are able to halve that. We can do that very easily in cooperation with India and provide the same level of care. Not half. Actually, we can make with a 100% profit margin, not 40, 50. The 100% profit margin, we can offer the same services at 1/3 the cost. So it'll be beneficial for us. At the same time, it'll be beneficial for the United States. And as I said, we are working together in a number of areas, like handling global pandemics. We can do that together. And taking into account our mutual concerns, because we want to promote innovation, we want to preserve you know, patent rights and other issues, but at the same time be aware of our responsibilities globally and towards our own country. The potential is huge, and we are starting to make some beginnings. And this is one area, actually two areas. One is health, and another area is education, where we can do much more to cooperate.
Okay,
Thank you.
One more question.
Thank you.
Right over here.
Thank you. My name is Daniel Hickey. I'm an expatriate from Brazil, and I've read Fareed Zakari's book, and I was just curious if you've read it, if you think it's not as much about, the book is the post-American age, and it's not as much about the decline of America as much as the rise of India, China, and countries like Brazil. So just curious what your opinion of that was, of the book itself.
Well, I can't give you an opinion. I haven't read it. But that's inevitable, isn't it? I mean, if you look at it, I mean, it's just been, I mean, we are talking of thousands of years of Indian history, and if you really look at it, it's not that long. I mean, it's about 3 centuries ago that a country like India accounted for about 20% of the global GDP. So, and that was true for century after century, even millennia. So it's been a gap, and we are catching up. So what's happening today is just the beginning of a process, just the beginning of a process. It's inevitable that we, you know, sometimes we don't get it right, you know, we don't get our act together. But even if we don't, we'll maybe postpone that day by a decade or two. But it's inevitable that India is going to emerge as one of the 3 largest economies of the world. That's inevitable. What we would like is that in that, while growing, that we should also look beyond our country's borders. We have to look at ourselves as global citizens, and that's why, you know, that's why I was talking of issues like environment, energy policies, the green society. We're talking of other issues like making the world a little bit safer. Not just India-Pakistan issues or something like that. That's, in fact, a very distorting sub-regional perspective. You look at it in larger areas with the common threats that we face from religious radicalism, and to which, together with narcotics, trafficking is, you know, promoting global terrorism, and some of the other big challenges that we face. But that, and I think also it is. I haven't read the book, and I won't comment on that. But I think the United States will remain a very, very important player. It's not going to be the only player, but it's undoubtedly going to remain one of the 3 or 4 major global players for the foreseeable future.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a round of applause for